Wow, did Raiders star pass rusher Maxx Crosby just diss his former head coach Josh McDaniels? Plus, we have a depressed Raiders fan who has no hope for the season. I'm gonna give some reasons why he needs to turn this frown upside down. By the way, my co-host Dial Up Audrey and me, Wi-Fi Willie, will be live during the Raiders versus San Francisco 49ers preseason game on Friday night. Make sure you join us here on this channel. So a lot of Raiders fans are down on the season right now after so much optimism during free agency and the NFL draft. This is mainly because the starting offense without Davante Adams and Brock Bowers, however, did not perform that well against the Dallas Cowboys. Mainly the quarterbacks seemed to struggle. But even though people like me have been incredibly critical of the team, you know I gotta call it exactly how I see it, there is still reasons for hope. And at the end of the day, it is still preseason. You cannot make too many bold predictions based off these meaningless games. Look, in 2022, the Raiders went undefeated during preseason. They had 4 preseason games, including the Hall of Fame game, and that didn't mean anything. They still had a miserable season. Granted, that wasn't really due to the roster, but instead due to Josh McDaniels. And you can see the lack of optimism through this young Raiders fan in this interview with ABC.
How are you feeling with the team this year?
We're not going to the Super Bowl. I already know it. I already know it.
What do you think, guys? This young man says the Raiders aren't going to the Super Bowl this year. Is he a fake-ass fan? But it did bum me out to see this young guy so bummed out. But I guess at the end of the day, at least he's realistic.
We got a realistic Raiders fan here. This is odd. This is the first interview I've ever had like this.
I like how this interviewer said this has never happened before. I wonder how many grown adults he has talked to who said that the Raiders are for sure going to the Super Bowl. And look, I'm not saying to be that delusional, but at the end of the day, we do not know what is going to happen. And there are teams every single year that surpass expectations and completely shock the NFL world. And the Raiders have the players available to be one of them. But what this young man said next was absolutely hilarious.
Super Bowl chances are not good, but what is it going to take for the Raiders to have a successful season, you think?
Not to get arrested.
Just don't get arrested this year. That is absolutely hilarious. But to be fair, we no longer have the Damon Arnett's on this football team. Chandler Jones is also off the squad, and he has since deactivated his Twitter account. But there are reasons to believe that the Raiders could be a sleeper team. I think the NFL world and the NFL media seems to like the new head coach Antonio Pierce. I mean, they even made the guy super skinny in this brand new Madden 25 football game. They made Antonio Pierce look absolutely ripped. But in all seriousness, despite the lackluster performance in preseason, there are tons of reasons to be positive. The offensive line still did well last year down the stretch, and they recently have gotten Colton Miller back. This guy is the highest paid offensive lineman on the Raiders football team. He is one of the best left tackles in the entire league, and he looks healthy and ready to go. On top of that, the second round pick Jackson Powers Johnson is also coming back. We don't know if he's going to play week 1, but that definitely makes that offensive line group even stronger. And the quarterback position doesn't matter if you don't have any weapons, and the Raiders have the best weapons in the entire AFC West division without a doubt. Brock Bowers, the first round pick, looked fire in the first preseason game. You have Davante Adams, who's one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. Also, Jacoby Myers is a great wide receiver. And Trey Tucker, we've seen this guy emerge and shine and look like the true speedy deep threat that the Raiders need. You saw Gardner Minshew already building some chemistry with this guy during the past preseason game. So literally every other aspect of the offense looks great besides the question mark at the quarterback position. But if any quarterback is going to shock the world, I think it is going to be this guy, Minshew Mania. But in all seriousness, we can't act like Gardner Minshew is just the worst quarterback in the NFL. That's just not true. The guy made the Pro Bowl last year for a reason, honestly looked like an upgrade over the first round pick Anthony Richardson with the Indianapolis Colts. And I don't think his biggest problem so far in preseason has necessarily been skill. But in my opinion, it just looks like he hasn't gotten comfortable in Vegas. He doesn't know a lot of his teammates that well. He's a new guy. He really just needs to build his swagger and his confidence back that he had in Indianapolis, that he had with the Jacksonville Jaguars. And just like I mentioned earlier, because the Raiders have so many great weapons, he just has to perform at an above average level. Nobody is asking him to be the best quarterback in the NFL. And speaking of the weapons, when has Minshew had any weapons like this at all whatsoever? Just going based on last year, he only had Michael Pittman Jr. at the wide receiver position. And outside of Pittman, he did not really have many great receiving threats. Yeah, they got Jonathan Taylor at running back, but that's about it in Indianapolis. And I don't really care about the stats. Obviously, the stats were not that sexy for Gardner Minshew last year, but he won in games. The Indianapolis Colts beat the Baltimore Ravens led by Lamar Jackson, who the Raiders are playing in week 2 of the regular season. If Gardner Minshew was able to beat the Ravens last year with inferior weapons to what the Raiders have this year, why can't the Raiders go ahead and beat the Baltimore Ravens this year in week 2? I'm not saying it's gonna happen. I'm not saying it's likely gonna happen, but it definitely could happen, and there's no reason to completely write it off. And like a lot of people who followed the Colts last year know, Gardner Minshew was literally one play away from beating the Houston Texans and potentially leading that team to the playoffs. And I think a lot of people would be looking at this quarterback a lot differently if just a few plays here and there were made. The offensive side of the football seems to be the main question mark because a lot of Raiders fans know that the defense is going to be for real this year. You got multiple years in the system with Patrick Graham. The D-line is arguably one of the best D-lines in football. I know some of the starting defense did not do that well with the Dallas Cowboys, but when the starting defense started to fall off, the starting D-line wasn't there, which is where the Raiders have spent all their money on the defensive side of the football. So if the whole D-line is not there, it's basically not the starting defense. I still have questions about the secondary, mainly the cornerback position. I do not think there is much depth there. But if cornerbacks like Jack Jones and Nate Hobbs can stay healthy for the majority of the season, I think this could still be a top defense in the NFL. So yes, I have been skeptical about how this team is going to do, and I'm mainly being real about the situation because I don't want people going out there and placing irrational bets based on what I'm saying. But to this young man, to this young little Raiders fan, there is no reason right now to completely write this team off before they have played even one regular season game. One man who has been completely written off is the former Raiders head coach Josh McDaniels, and I find it quite interesting that we have heard nothing from that guy since he has been fired from the Las Vegas Raiders. And it's actually kind of funny because usually when a head coach is let go, they release some kind of statement. Maybe they even say thank you to the fans. But we have heard zip and nada out of Josh McDaniels, and I think it's because that guy was just so incredibly disliked in that Raiders locker room. And you have Maxx Crosby on the OG's podcast talking about working with Antonio Pierce and why he prefers that to other coaches.
Head coach, that was a player, like, everyone can relate to him. So it's like there's a respect level where it's different when you got an old, short, fat white guy telling you, run to the ball, you're out of shape. Be like, you're out of shape. What are you talking about?
Now, technically, Maxx Crosby is not literally saying Josh McDaniels' name, but when you're talking about fat, short coaches yelling at you, I think there can only be one guy in mind. Who knows if Josh McDaniels will ever come back in the NFL? My dream is that Andy Reid eventually retires, and then the Kansas City Chiefs go ahead and hire Josh McDaniels. Please, please, the NFL gods, make that happen. So like I said earlier, we are going to be live during the Raiders versus Niners preseason game. Make sure you hang out with us on this channel. My name is Wi-Fi Willie. Peace out, and I hope you have a good one.